Welcome back to Fireside Giants, my friends, with your boys Alex and Anthony talking about Evan Neal today and his return following the MCL sprain. First came back against the Washington Commanders, last played against Jacksonville, obviously, when the injury occurred. And wow, this man came back in full form, apparently, because he was electric. He was fantastic. The best thing that can happen to an offensive lineman in the middle of a game is to not hear their name. The less you hear an offensive lineman's name, the better, because it means they're not getting beat by pass rushers. And Evan Neal, I think it was over 41 pass blocking snaps, didn't give up a single sack, didn't give up a single pressure. He was very, very, very good. And this is a huge indication of his growth and progress that he's made, courtesy of Bobby Johnson. Now, this Giants team obviously has a long way to go in terms of their interior offensive line. That's a discussion for another day. But right now, Evan Neal's growth is clear as day. He's making the progress, taking the steps forward that we've all expected, and he's turning into the bookend tackle we need him to be alongside Andrew Thomas. But, Anthony, looking at, everything that Evan Neal showed us this year, starting out kind of slow. We'll talk about his stats, how he's kind of developed, and the stats have deteriorated, which is a good thing. How excited are you about his future, especially after a dominant game against Washington?
I mean, I'm thrilled. I really loved the Evan Neal pick when it happened. In fact, I wanted him at 5, and then we landed Thibodeaux, which was a massive surprise, really exciting. He's also playing some great football right now. So getting Thibodeaux at 5 and then Neal at 7 was literally a dream come true for me, and as it was for pretty much all Giants fans. I think we were all super thrilled when that happened back in April, and now we're starting to see those players develop and turn into the stars that we knew that they could one day be, and that's finally starting to happen with Evan Neal. Now, Evan Neal, really slow start to his rookie season, as kind of expected, though. Offensive tackles usually come into the NFL, they struggle, but Evan Neal got injured, knocked out of the lineup for a little bit, and if you recall, I said this a few days ago in an episode, Alex, as we were preparing for this game against Washington. I basically said he's had all this time to sit there, watch his own film, and learn where he went wrong, basically, while he's recovering from this injury. And it seems like that's what he did, because night and day difference in pass protection. So really excited by this return from Evan Neal. I think he looked better than ever in that game returning from injury against Washington. And hopefully he can keep this going, because we know that we have some really tough matchups on the schedule. We play Washington again, and we know they have a great front seven. They have a great defensive line, but so does Philly. Philly also has a great defensive line, and so do Minnesota. There's a lot of really tough pass rushers basically left on the schedule for the Giants. So Evan Neal starting to play his best football right now. That's clutch. That's perfect. That's exactly when we need it, is right now during this home stretch to try and get into the postseason. So happy to see Evan Neal back in the lineup playing his best football, and excited to see how he can develop over the course of this final month of the season.
Absolutely. Now, guys, if you remember the Evan Neal we saw when the season began, it was not a good version of Evan Neal. Now, he gave up 5 sacks in his first 5 games, including what? I mean, 3, so 8, 11, 13 total pressures. 13 pressures, 5 sacks in his first 5 games. Now, in his last 3 games, my friends, he has not given up a sack and has given up 3 pressures. As I said before, he was probably his best as a pass blocker this season against Washington. Now, Montez Sweat was kind of in and out of that game, so obviously they had a couple of rotational guys coming in, but nonetheless, for a rookie, you want to see them lock down, average players. You don't want to see your rookies getting beat by average to below average guys. Evan Neal clearly stood his ground against, the second tier on that Washington defensive front, and a couple of Montez Sweat reps mixed into it. Now, his run blocking grades, not as prominent, not as great, but I'll tell you what, I was very impressed with the pass blocking development. Evan Neal's been a very good run blocking tackle for the Giants this year, in his first season as a pro. So right now, it kind of gives me like Andrew Thomas year 1 vibes, maybe even better, because I know Andrew Thomas gave up 10 sacks in his first season. Now we are going into week 14, so we have 4 weeks left of play. So 14, 15, 16, 17, 5. So we have 5 games left, actually, which, gives Evan Neal some time to have good or bad performances. But right now, I think that Evan Neal actually is on pace to have a better rookie season than Andrew Thomas, in my opinion. Now, if he could leverage that into a really, really good, sophomore campaign, having bookend tackles, and the Giants can really build out the interior of their offensive line, I think we're in a really good spot here, Anthony. When you're looking at the bookend nature of these tackles, how important is the interior line, like kind of developing that? Obviously, I think Josh Zudu is getting there. I think he needs more experience, needs a little bit more time to develop as a pass blocker. Mark Lewinsky seems like a bust right now. He was really bad. He gave up 2 sacks against Washington. I actually think Nick Gates could lock down that center spot, but they got to give him the job. I think Feliciano is kind of a liability. But right now, just seeing the growth of Evan Neal and kind of the offensive line, they can't really run a lot of true pass sets, as you see in Mike Kafka's scheme. Every time they try to run a true pass set, Daniel Jones ends up getting sacked or hit or pressured. So right now, it's hard to determine and kind of tell you that, Evan Neal is doing a dynamic, phenomenal job in true pass. That's more so in like play action and bootlegs. But how much do you think that translates over to, his development and growth, despite the fact that Giants offense really isn't where it wants to be as a passing offense?
Yeah, it's not where it wants to be. And as you mentioned, the interior offensive line is a real struggle for the Giants right now. Now, I love the bookends. Andrew Thomas, he's going to be an all pro this year, I think. I mean, he definitely deserves to be, even if he hasn't played his best football of the season over the past 2 weeks. Look at everything he did prior, and I'm sure he's going to bounce back real soon. Hopefully, this week against Philly, he has another dominant performance to prove why he deserves to be an all pro player. But I think Evan Neal has that same potential. He was arguably a better prospect coming out of Alabama than Andrew Thomas was coming out of Georgia. So when you look at that, you can say that if you're getting that same caliber of player from the left side of the line on the right side of the line with Evan Neal, that's really exciting for the Giants. And you're going to have two cheap, cost-controlled contracts as the bookends for your offensive line for a few years. And then eventually they're just going to turn into studs. And really the next step of that process for the Giants is to build that interior offensive line. Now, as you mentioned, Nick Gates, he might be able to steal that job from Feliciano, especially after Feliciano's taunting penalty. I know that Dable defended him on that, said it wasn't really his fault. The ref kind of made a bad judgment call there. But with Feliciano, he also hasn't been playing that well. So Nick Gates kind of moving around the line, playing a little bit better football. He might actually have an opportunity to steal that position, as you just mentioned. But right guard, left guard, and center are all question marks going into this offseason in my eyes. I think that the Giants have to, first of all, address the wide receiver position, right? That is probably going to be number one here as the Giants move into that offseason after this final stretch and hopefully a successful playoff run. But when you look at this team and where they're going to allocate their resources and draft capital, wide receiver is going to be an area of great importance, but so is interior offensive line. If I had to guess how much money they were to funnel into each position group or how much draft capital, I'm saying number one is actually going to be interior offensive line. Then number two is going to be receiver. It's almost more important because you have a lot of dependency problems in this Giants offense. Daniel Jones is dependent on a good offensive line. Saquon Barkley is also dependent on a good offensive line. And what is a shiny new toy in your receiving group if the offensive line can't block for your quarterback and your quarterback can't throw the ball to that new shiny receiver, right? So the Giants need to fix that. The interior offensive line, you mentioned it. Joshua Ezeudu, I like what he's brought to the table here and there. He's a young guy. He's a rookie. He's a mid-round pick. He's going to need a lot of time to develop before he's ready to be a full-time starter in the NFL in my eyes. So when you look at that position, I wouldn't even be afraid to upgrade there as well. I like what Ezeudu has, but maybe long-term he's a great backup. I'm always shooting for the stars here and looking to acquire as much talent on the interior as they can. So I think that's the road that the Giants are going to take here when we do get to the offseason. And it's a little premature to be looking at that right now, but right currently for this final month of the year, that is kind of my biggest concern for the offense is the interior offensive line. Somehow, some way, the Giants receivers, for the most part, are figuring out ways to get things done. Isaiah Hodgins entering the lineup, playing some good football lately. I like what he's bringing to the table. Maybe he's the answer for the Giants for at least a few weeks. Richie James, obviously we know that game against Seattle is going to be ingrained in our minds forever because of the way he blew that, but really clutch catch down the stretch there in the fourth quarter of that Washington game that really should have put the Giants in position to win. So the Giants are finding players in the receiving department to get the job done, and it might not be the guys they want to, like Galladay and the other guys who are injured, but they're finding ways to get it done. But on the interior, it's a different story. It's been a revolving door there, and they haven't found an answer. Everybody has struggled on the interior offensive line positions, whether that be Feliciano, Gates, Glowinski, Ezeudu. They're all struggling horribly. So the Giants really do need to take a look at that position, see if they can find someone, whether that be on the waiver wire, on the practice squad, or maybe change up the scheme a little bit to help mask some of these deficiencies. But right now, that is a struggle for them. I love what Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas are doing at the tackle positions, and that's really the saving grace of this offensive line. But they're really just beautiful bread sandwiching a bunch of rotten meat right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is the most okay. What I can say about Evan Neal is very simple. I have one really important thing to say, and I think that aside from him being a very talented, tangible athlete, tangible player, the intangibles are what stand out to me with him. He is just a fantastic young man. You know what I mean? He wants to win so bad. Coming from Alabama, he was dominant, right? He kicked the crap out of everybody. Every single person he went up against, he kicked the crap out of them. You go to the NFL, you get beat up. How do you respond, right? How do you respond by getting from after getting beat up against Dallas. We gave up what, 3 sacks, 2 sacks in that game. Yeah, 3 sacks against Dallas in week 3. Listen, what he said after getting absolutely demolished is what made me believe that we're going to be just fine, or he's going to be just fine, right? His quotes were great because not only does he take responsibility and accountability for that poor performance, but he also tells us exactly what went wrong. And I think that's the difference between some players is like, I take full responsibility, but they don't acknowledge what they did wrong. And this is what the exact quote was. He says, it's hard to win that way. The bulk of those sacks were on me. I take full responsibility for that. I've just got to play better. I hate being on the end of this. You could tell watching him and watching what he said, he just absolutely hated that entire, exhibition, that entire sequence. Then he goes on to say, I got edged a lot. It's my set angles. I wasn't staying true to my set angles. I got beat on the edge a lot. That's something I'm going to have to clean up. Sometimes it just happens like that. I don't have an answer or explanation why. Sometimes in a football game, it just pans out the way it wasn't the result that I wanted. So I love how he took accountability, but then also said, I know exactly what I did wrong and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to clean it up. A lot of players will be like, I don't know what happened. I take responsibility, but I'm not exactly sure what I did wrong. I don't know. They had a good game. He identified exactly the problem that was happening. And he said, I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to correct this and fix this. And I thought that was a pretty awesome thing, that he was able to recognize after the game immediately how he was getting beat. And you could see, Anthony, you pointed this out a couple of weeks ago, his pass sets, he wasn't getting his leg. His kick step was so small. It was so, the flexibility. You watch Andrew Thomas, the guy bounces out of it. He's so quick to react. I think Evan Neal, we're starting to see that reaction timing, that athleticism, that flexibility kind of kick into shape. And he's starting to take a much bigger role on this offense. And as a right tackle, that's an important position, one of the most important positions in the game, both of those tackle spots. So I'm very happy to see that not only is Evan Neal just a young, great player, now with all the tangible traits, but he's also just a great young man that understands taking responsibility. He fits the culture. He's a very humble guy, but he's also a demon on the field, man. The guy is an absolute tank. So am I, kind of sitting here saying that Evan Neal is having a great season? No, that's not what I'm trying to say. He's not having a great season by any means, but it's the growth that you see within that season that stands out to me, right? It's the growth that you see week over week. And I think that that's something that we can harp on and really suggest that, he's taking the developmental steps forward to put his best foot forward for the future, guys. But I'd love to hear your perspectives below on Evan Neal, your thoughts about his growth this year, listening to the quotes, listening to the stats and everything he has to offer. I'm pretty happy with where our rookies are right now and the contributions they've made. I think that they've been impact players for the most part. I know a lot of people disagreed with me yesterday about Kayvon Thibodeau, but, I don't think sacks are everything. It's a discussion for another day, but always happy to hear your perspectives and opinions below in the YouTube comments. And make sure to like and subscribe as always, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.